Thank you. Thanks for joining us in July of 2022 for our Kentucky K-12 EdTech Leaders and CIO webcast. I'm David Couch with the Kentucky Department of Education. For those that are new, we do this once a month. Only state in America has been doing this for close to 15 years. So thanks for joining us today. This is our way to share some information out, get some information from you all. We have Go Soapbox up and available. We have questions for you to respond to, and those questions help your fellow peers understand what other districts are doing along with us. So appreciate for you to get on Go Soapbox and fill those out, and we'll go through those throughout the webcast. We also have a good part of our OET staff here. The ones that are on vacation are joining us today, and so thanks for joining us. And the ones that are on vacation joining us, you need to log off immediately and continue enjoying your vacation. So I know we may have one or two that we may have to remove off here from our staff. So and thanks for districts for joining us. We also offer this not in teams, but to others beyond our districts and KD. We do a KD media portal through YouTube for our educational co-ops, and to our KETS partners, which are vendors and a variety of other organizations that help us. So once again, thanks for joining us on July. Sent you the agenda for today, along with the summary of last month, which is done by Lisa Moore. Lisa, thanks for doing that again and going through. And Lisa gets to listen to these twice or more than that when doing those. So thank you for doing that summary of the highlights. If you want to listen to the whole thing, obviously that's always available and made to copy and paste, and it's a way to kind of catch up with what we're doing. So we'll go ahead and get started. The first one is I sent you, I think it was yesterday. Was it just yesterday? About the Stillwell Award. And so I want to thank all the folks that are part of this team's meeting for being part of our special Stillwell Award. And I just wanted to follow up with a couple of things we're doing with it. A press release is being worked out that are going out today. Also working with our communication folks to send something to your superintendent. So I know it's one thing to send to you, but it's another one to get it from someone else. So the press release worked on it yesterday, goes out, I'm assuming today. And you know, we don't have control what newspapers cover it and don't cover it. But obviously, you know, we hope that's picked up by some. But it's a good news story, so it's tough to pick that one up. And once again, sending to your superintendents. Dee Dee, a data systems update with school report certificateness. Anything else related to data?
Sure, thank you. It's school report card time a year again. So be aware that work has started. It also includes the technology data collection. So if you're a part of that, or if you're just verifying what your principals put in, either way, please go ahead and take a look at that information.
Hey, Ms. Bell.
And see how that's going. Also, we did some FERPA 101 and FERPA 201 trainings. I guess it was last month. And those trainings are available. We'll hope you'll start including those in professional development in your district. It was June, so we know it's hard to catch people. We did have very good attendance, but we really feel like those recordings, and they're available in campus communities. So they're available to you. We did have to put them somewhere. They were behind a login. Otherwise, PTAC wouldn't go into as much detail as they did. Another reminder is the Infinite Campus annual invoices have gone out. They went out back in April, but just looking at our information from our question, it seems like a lot of you aren't sure on this one, and there's a really good split between 22 and 23 funds that are being used. So I think it's a good thing that we continue to ask them to bill early and give you until August 15th to actually approve and get the payment made. The reason we bring this to your attention, it's never happened before, and David's pointed this out, is that if you don't pay in advance, by the due date, the only source of funds that we have to make it right, is to take it out of the CATS offers. So we've never had to do that. We hope we never have to, but we do want to bring this to your attention and make sure that people are looking at making sure those payments are made by the middle of August. So there's still time. If you do not have a data invoice, or not, an Infinite Campus invoice, I should say, reach out to the KDE data request at education.ky.gov. And Ryan's on the call. He's shaking his head up and down. If you can see him, he will get those out to you, so you'll have a copy of your invoice to move forward. So do keep that in mind on this. We also have the SAML integration. We're working on so some districts that are asking questions about that. I think there'll be more about that later. And we've opened campus analytics to districts. This has been a premium product, and previously you had pieces of it. You had the data health check and you had the early warning system, but we've opened it all up, and we're using some of our ESSER money to improve the analytics that are available within campus. So we do want to make sure that folks are looking at that and help promote that locally. And, obviously we're always open to input into what you'd like to see in the analytics tools. We do have also, we've got a question out there about the People Role Manager. We know we rely very heavily on folks of the WAPOC specifically to make sure the People Role Manager contacts are updated. We use those to communicate out with districts in different areas. We also use that to give us school report card access. So if folks need access if they're in key roles like superintendent, principal, and some other roles, they'll automatically get access. Otherwise, you do need to go ahead and set those up for folks to make sure they do have that access. And it looks like a number of you have already done it. Some of you maybe have not been engaged yet, just based on what I'm seeing in the feedback in the Go Soapbox. And if you've not logged on to Go Soapbox, please do that so that we can go ahead and get some more input on these questions. They really do help us guide changes. If you have folks that have come back or are about to come back and they've missed our beginning of year training, those resources are available on our CASES training page. So you can search for that page pretty easily. And then there's some parchment training coming up, also noted on that page, so that you can have some information there available for folks that are counselors or maybe new counselors or somebody that needs to have an update. So I think that's my update data. David, if you have any questions, or go ahead and put those in Go Soapbox.
Thank you, Dee Dee.
All right.
So we're spend time next on the, and we do this every year, and it's required by law that we present to our Kentucky Board of Education, really and get their approval for the KETS funds to be spent, which is a tiny sliver that's 15.4 million. But I always use the opportunity with our state board, even though it's not required, to let them and educate them on all the funding sources that are available to address all the technology need. Our master plan for education technology identifies $366 million annually. Historically, we have been far below that. We have been 100 million, 140 million annually below that. So what that has meant for a long time is districts just go without. They keep technology a lot longer. The biggest part is they don't adequately fund the people side of technology in their district, and so they go without. They're tremendously understaffed. So mainly it's been going without for a long time, and that really is before the pandemic. What I'm going to share with you and share with our board members is during the pandemic, our funding stream changed dramatically to the positive. But it's a bit of an illusion, the funding that we have, because much like Cinderella, in school year 24 and 25, all that funding suddenly goes away. It's going away gradually in 23 and 22. September of this year, CARES 1.0 goes away. In September of next year, in 23, CARES 2.0 goes away. In September of 24, CARES 3 goes away. There is no CARES 4, by the way. So we have a sudden drop of funding. So what I'm going to share with you is all the funding sources that are available, but also what I'm sharing with the board, our Kentucky Board of Education, because my goal is to have them make technology funding one of their top 5 priorities in the next legislative session that deals with budgeting. Our board has been very successful over the course of many years. Their top priority is getting funded. And so, we're happy for a lot of other programs getting substantial funding. Career and technical education, which has been underfunded, got substantial new funding in this legislative session. Transportation, kindergarten got substantial new funding in this legislative session. This Kentucky School of the Deaf and Blind got substantial new funding, and not this session, but the one before that. So we're all for that, but the key part of that is a top 5 priority of our Kentucky Board of Education, which is only one step. It's got to then take the top step of being one of the top priorities of the governor's office. And then it's got to be one of the top priorities, what they call the K groups that are out there, Kentucky School of Superintendents, Kentucky Association of School Superintendents, and school boards. And we call them the K groups. So it's got to be one of their top ones that they're talking with legislators with. And also, probably the key component is districts. You all and your superintendents are asking legislators to make it a top funding requirement. So we're happy for those other programs getting funding, but I do think it's our turn to get substantial funding, and we're going to need it to weather the substantial funding drop in school year 24 and 25. So let me begin to share with you documents that we'll share with the board, and will be available to you all as well. So let me go down here, find wording here. Here we go. All right. I'm assuming everybody can see this now, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So we have what we call a staff note. I'm assuming you have something similar when something's being presented to your board, but it's a write-up that goes to the board members to educate them on it, and then actually during the board meeting you go over parts of it. You don't read line by line, which I won't do today. I'll highlight some of these portions of it, but obviously, you give a summary at the very beginning of it. And the bottom line out of all of this is just the board has to approve, $15.4 million going toward this unmet need of $366 million that you see there. Which you can see that's a small portion, but plays an important role in our shared services, the districts, OET shared services districts, as well as the KETS offers of assistance. There's also the other funding sources we call the Kentucky Educational Network funding sources, which has gotten cut over time along with KETS. I mean, to give the history, that 15.4 used to be 19.5 way back in 1992. So 30 years, typically you would have some growth in that, cost of living growth. There's been zero. And, the services that we all offer, along with everything that takes going, it typically has a funding increase through the years. It's not been recognized. The good news is there's $487 million above that $15.4 million to help address the $366 million. Now, earlier I told you, and I always think it's important for people to understand how the money works of things. And so, well, folks will say, wow, look at all that money you got. If you add 487 and 15, you get $502 million. Well, you got way too much money. And so the key point that I point out to folks is for decades, we have been underfunded by 100 million to 140 million. And so a good part of that is just catching up. Also, a good part of that is brand new initiatives that came out, like a one-to-one all the way down to kindergarten level that came out during the pandemic, and all what it takes to support that with the people side and the software and the services that it takes to put that in place. And so we just remind them of that. So that's the opening, the bottom line. I mentioned that here. There's been the first line, a recent very large influx of one-time money, but that ends. This is the highest amount by far in my 30 years in the existence of the Kentucky Education Technology Program of funding that we've had available. We will also have a very large amount of money the school year after the one coming up. It's the one after that we have this significant drop. So very happy, and this gives you a layout of what we have been presenting to the board the past 7 years. You can say in school year 16 and 17, it was $215 million to address that $336 million, $366 million unmet need or technology need. So you can see that was far below what we identified. Got a little bit better in school years 17 and 18, a little bit better and 19. The year 19-20 is really showing the impact of the pandemic. You really could see from March to June from the munis purchasing, and they're really blessed in this state to have a single financial management system. So it gives us a good feel for on a very general level, large scale level, micro level, or say macro level, where how the money is being spent. And you can really see a $20 million jump that would normally be spent. It was, trying to buy student staff computer purchases during that time. Then all come in, but you can see the jump during that time. And then in 2021, you can see that there was some of that CARES 1.0 money that started coming into play. In 21 and 22, you can see the CARES 1 and CARES 2 money coming into play. And then, you can see the full impact of the CARES 1, 2, and 3 money. That's the special federal funds that were for COVID coming into play, along with another funding source of beyond the CARES money, emergency connectivity funds, which Kentucky K-12, along with E-rate, has maximized that. A lot of that has to do with the product standards and us moving together in a direction and being very well prepared to take advantage of those kind of services. Once again, in the history of KETS, this is by far the most amount, $502 million identified for spending. And so that's great news. And that's absolutely just wonderful news from a lot of different fronts. And grateful for that. And, a good amount of that has to do with us and OET making great justification for that, and KDE for money to be spent on technology. You and the districts making great case with your district staff or your district leadership for funds to be spent that were identified that could be spent on a variety of things on technology. And to be honest with you, there was just money that could only be spent on technology that contributed to this. So very thankful and grateful. And, people are buying tons of the stuff. My concern is the people side of this is tremendously underfunded. We've done a really good job with digital learning coaches, taking a while for people to understand the value of those. Always has been a value since the beginning of KETS, and always wanted that. They've been called different names, technology resource teachers, and now digital learning coaches, which are, one of the groups of the big heroes during the pandemic, those digital learning coaches for sure. We want to sustain those positions in districts, and I think people have seen the added value of it. But my concern is the technical staff has not jumped up at all. In fact, it has gotten smaller during all this stuff is being bought. And so that's a point of concern. And it's why in this paragraph, and what I'll be presenting to the board very bluntly, I'll be doing it very respectfully, is we are very happy for these other organizations getting significant new funding that the board made a top 5 priority. But my strong advice is the Kentucky Board of Education must make this a top 5 funding priority in the upcoming legislative session. By the way, Commissioner Glass, I've spoken with him. He is all very supportive of this. And so he'll be supportive of that with the board members. But we need other aspects happening. And that's why you see some of the Go Soapbox questions. It's just not that. And obviously, we'll be working on the governor's office as much as we can to make it, when it comes out of the gate and they propose their budget, it's there. And it's important that in the House and Senate, and when it comes out of the gate in their budgets, it's there. And that takes a lot of the work from you all. And you can't wait till a month or two before legislative session. It's got to start occurring now and constantly about this. And so these are the talking points that we would like you to use, we're going to use for that funding. We want the KETS allocation to come up to at least $25 million. And this is to address the inflation. We've gotten zero money for inflation. We've gotten cuts over the past 11 years, and everybody got cuts, but they weren't restored in this session. And to address the replacement of this technology that has been being put in place since 2020 was new then, but by the time this starts happening here, that will be outdated and need to be replaced, along with dealing with something with the bandwidth. We put in additional bandwidth during the pandemic because all these new devices being bought and the use of technology. Well, we got to make sure that something can fund that. We're using the special temporary funds to fund that. As sometime those funds drop, and we will need a funding source to take its place. And the number two priority, and this is where you can, I really hope you mark it number one, but also number two, this is just to help yourself. As I mentioned before, my view of the underfunding over the past years and to my disappointment during the pandemic and all this funding, the people side was still not funded to the levels that I think it has to be funded. And this puts at risk, the things being reliable and maximized, along with, things just, you got cybersecurity in place. So those are our major talking points, at least on this one. There's other things that are really, similar from past staff notes, but these parts at the very beginning are new portions of it.
So David, couple of points here. One, we got a couple of Go Soapbox questions that we might want to bring up that are related specifically to activity around communicating and talking with folks about funding. And then another point that I want to make when we talk about this influx of funding, which is a great thing, but it really does come down to the strategies utilized on how to maximize the funding and to be mindful and thoughtful about how the funding is utilized. And what I'm really wanting to get at is there are items that make up the annual unmet need, the need that we have identified in the master plan. There are items that, are hard to address with this special funding. So we recognize that there are items that make up that, you can say, well, you got more money than you need. I mean, people will come to that conclusion when they see that the dollar amount of different funding sources is more than is required to address that annual need identified in the master plan. But again, there are items in there that you can't just take some of that special money and specifically target it toward those items. And so hopefully districts have been strategic in utilizing the special money where they can, and then therefore freeing up other local money that can go toward some of those items that the special money can't go toward. That's just my simple way of speaking to that point. And we don't have that, real specifically and clearly identified, like where are the areas of gaps that still likely exist and can't easily be addressed with the influx of money. But we know there's some of those kind of things that are out there. And so anyway, I think it's just something to be for districts to for one, I want them to understand that we recognize that. And then obviously districts certainly need to be strategic and mindful about how they, maximize the money and are smart about use this money in the right place so that it allows me to use other money in another place and that kind of stuff. So anyway, I just wanted to make that point. And then again, I wanted to remind us that we do have Go Soapbox questions that we can bring up at some point as we're talking here.
I think the part I'll bring those up is after we kind of go through the numbers here. We'll bring those up. But Mike, I would say this is the hesitancy. I think I'm very clearly say a huge gap that we have is the people side. Districts are not adequately funded because superintendents and boards were hesitant to use any of that money to get positions because it's not ongoing. Now they did bump up, digital learning coaches, and I really truly hope they find a funding source to sustain that position. But that's say we've got two priorities for that, to increase the money. The people side, which districts should help us, should be more than willing to help us champion that, along with the money to replace the old stuff that will start happening to them as this money starts, reaching a cliff and dropping off. Along with us being able to maintain bandwidth speeds and not having to ratchet it down to slower speeds because we don't have the money to sustain it. Those are the three big ones. This is the 15.4 million breakout of the funds that we have in place. I've had up there for a bit. And then we go to the other funding sources that make up that $486 million. The legislature has funded what we do with our computer science and IT academy for industry recognized certificates. And these are ones that are extremely marketable. We did battle in the early days, for those not aware of it, with certain certifications that you have them, but they don't carry a lot of weight. I mean, you're not going to get, I mean, you can have them, but these are the ones that really carry weight with employers. It's not just a nice, because you can get certain certificates that you got them, but they're not very marketable. Or it's a tiny niche that they're marketable to. These are extremely marketable to a wide percentage. And so that's fun. That's money that the legislature provided to us that we're appreciative of. Obviously, the E-rate money coming in, we estimate is $12.8 million. This is from the money that we pay for on behalf of district, and you can see the breakout of those funds and what those are used for when they come back in. And one of the things I would like to fix, to be honest with you, is when the legislature funded our new student information system back in the 2005 timeframe, they unfortunately didn't fund the sustainment funds. And so for years, I've been trying to find a way for the sustainment funds of Infinite Campus, at least the state portion, being paid from a separate funding source than E-rate rebates. And so part of us asking for additional money is also taking into account that we'll start paying for X amount of these costs. For example, the student information system, out of that, if we can get the kits baseline raised, we can start taking the money out of that versus out of the rebates that we get. It was the only funding source that we have available. You can also see kind of when we're trying to do some updates to the internet, if we get the appropriate funding from the legislature, we don't have to have a special funding source that's really counting on E-rate rebates to bump up districts' internet speeds. So that's what we're trying to do, raise the baseline so we're not involved with using these funding sources for that purpose. And the entire amount can really be used, or very close to the entire amount can be used in KETS offers. So that's the strategic part of it, but we need your help in doing that. We always have contingency of $1 million. Obviously, we don't use that. It goes back into other things like offers if we end up not using that, but you always got to have that, because over the years, we've had to use that for things that we weren't planning on. I can think of the DDoS attacks that happened 10, 11 years ago that it nearly it did shut down a large part of our state, and we had to hurry up and get a service in place, which thankfully we had a good partner with our KH3 provider that was able to hurry up and within a week get that service up and available, which normally would take months or a year to do that from start to finish. But that's how that came into play. You can see this is the amount of money. We're anticipating $12.6 million in KETS offers out there that will be matched equally. And that's really a strength of the KETS program, that we get a bang, we get a 3 to 4 bang for every buck. No other state in America, K-12, gets more bang for the buck than we do with KETS, with our offers of assistance. The districts match it equally. We get E-rate rebates. You all get them for things that you offer that you can see down here. That means we get a 3 to 4 bang for every dollar. And that's another big push for our legislature, is the amount of money that we make, and that we're able to double and triple the money that we have. It is a great investment to invest in us. You see the ESSER funds, and these are funds that go away, but they're there. $14.2 million, but that goes to zero at some point. Emergency connectivity funds, also a huge amount of money. That goes to zero. I don't know if that's beginning after this next school year. I think those are very temporary funds, as long as they have them. It seems like it was $8 or $9 billion. It was a huge amount of dollars nationwide to go over a course of X number of years. So we're very good at applying for that and getting that. Not just applying, but districts getting that. So congratulations on those funding sources. Here's another, some more of the funding sources. This is the 10% shared services, and this is what, at least I would say, OET did well with the amount of money that the agency was allowed to spend on COVID on behalf of districts. EdTech, K-12 EdTech got the biggest portion of that by a pretty good margin here in KDE. So a lot of that has to do with making good justifications for that. with the commissioner and with our board and the other offices agreeing to that in KDE. So we're fortunate with that. But once again, those monies end in the future. Federal E-rate, $27 million that district directly applied for. $17.3 million. I think at one time that was 18.4 before the housing market crashed. So we're trying to get that one back up. That pays for the bandwidth. We actually get not just restore the cut, go above that one. So we're not having to, as I mentioned before, anytime someone needs more bandwidth, we're not having to use E-rate rebate money to do that. There's a funding source that's available to do that. School facility funds, construction funds. This is for new construction, brand new schools, or major renovations. And this is out of all the stuff we do, an estimate. We don't want to have folks have to spend a lot of time and energy on this and break that cost out, because that would cost them more money doing that. But we have a pretty good feel for that. So that's we call it a SWAG number. And for those who don't know SWAG, it's a military term they have. It's called a scientific wild ass guess, but it's a pretty good one for $15 million. And so we also take a look at the KD program areas. No Kentucky Department of Education or no Department of Education in America at the state level has a better handle on all the funding sources that go on to education technology than Kentucky. Nobody's close. We do the total cost, regardless of the office is paying for it, regardless of the funding source. There's too many divisions, and there's tons of divisions in these other DOEs across America where there's no cooperation where they share that information. But we have that and have had it for a long time here in KDE. So this shows you other program areas that are putting in place technology-enabled systems and the amount of money, the total amount of money that's going toward that. There's two funding sources in that go away. One is for the area technology centers. There's 10% state shared services for them. That goes away. And also Kentucky School Deaf and Blind. But the rest of those are stable funding sources that will be in place for the foreseeable future. And there's another, we take a look at the technology activity reports. This is the TARs. So the data that you all turn in with your digital activity reports and your technology activity reports through Munis, it gives verification as is required by law. When we use those two things to kind of vector, we see the amount of money that's being spent and see if that makes sense with the numbers of totals of the inventories that we get. Those should align fairly closely. It's not 100%, nothing's 100% perfect, but those kind of give us a high degree of confidence, those two sources, that these numbers are accurate as we kind of go forward. And you can see a huge amount of money is being spent from these other funding sources, including SEEP, for that grand total of $502 million. So this is a good time to go through the Go Soapbox questions, Mike, as you suggested. So let's show those. I think you had those queued up ready to go before I started time to talk about those before.
Yeah, Didi, I think, yep.
All right, this is the first one, David. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yep, we see it. So this first one, does your district have a plan to address future funding requirements after currently available temporary federal funding for K-12 EdTech services?
Yeah.
So
we all better start getting that there radar screen of folks.
Yeah.
To properly set
it seems like it's a 50-50 split.
Yeah. So thanks for those that do, and we got to get going. You can't wait the last second. Okay. Thanks.
Well, they're communicating at least out there, or they're planning to, so that's good.
And don't stop communicating. Don't do just one. Be a constant whiner, along with giving good data that's available out there. So it's a combination of the two.
So obviously the all most of the above kind of captures everybody. District leadership certainly ranking high on who is in that group of.
So I would say that
with.
And everybody says, I don't want to get involved in the money aspect of it. If you don't get involved, you don't get money. That big amount of money that we just showed that OET is, if I'm not involved with that, we get zero. We got zero. There's nobody there that's taking care. So you have to, in these roles that you're in, get involved with the money aspect, or you suspect zero, or it be taken away. It's really pretty blunt with that. That means working on the superintendent, your finance officer, and the finance officer, and that superintendent being vocal with those K groups as they set their priorities. The Kentucky Association of School Superintendents, the Kentucky Association of School Board members, all those different groups are getting it on their radar screen and they're mentioning it. Also mentioning it to those legislators that actually, set the budget when it comes out of the House and Senate. Those are just crucial. And I know those are painful. Those aren't fun things to do, but they're necessary if there really is going to be a push. And I guarantee you the ones that got this money before that identified, they did all these. And they didn't have, 3% local legislators. That was incredibly high. I would say that had been a 70, 80%. District leadership would have been 80, 90%. So I'm just telling you, if you're counting on somebody else to take care of you, you'll be taken care of, but not in the way that you hoped, in the way the opposite that you hoped.
Be able to tell your story too. I mean, some of the things that the state has, provided funding for, just in my area, is the campus learning online registration. That could have been a real savings for staff resources and stuff like that. As you're looking for new funds, make sure you're, explaining the impacts of being able to continue some of this on.
Thanks.
Was there another one, David?
No, you can take it off. And if you could highlight me on this one, so I.
Hey, David.
Yeah.
Before we leave, I got to plug the people side just one more time, because I think for our district leaders, there's another dynamic that everybody needs to be aware of that's making this more and more and more difficult every day. Okay. And David, to your point, this is where our folks have really got to get at the table, and they've got to dig, all right, to build up, all right, that support for what we need. But, in a normal time, and I'm putting air quotes around a normal time, it's always been difficult to attract and sustain technical talent in K-12. All right. K-12 has always been subject to what I call being rated for their top technical talent. Well, I hope folks can start to recognize, and we're seeing this in the field through our KETS engineers, contacts we've got with local CIOs. There's a white hot job market out there right now. And there's some new and really interesting dynamics that are causing districts to lose a lot of their best technical people. And it's happening at a rate now more than it's ever happened in the past. So, the opportunity to get at that big table to talk about people strategies, staffing strategies, salary strategies, and all of that, all of which require money, all right, is going to be really a good opportunity and a challenge moving forward that just adds to that people side deficit. So just wanted to plug, how important it's going to be. Forget about the stuff. We got lots of stuff, but we got to have the people that we can sustain long term, or support, staffing strategies that will help us sustain what we've put in place. So I just wanted to plug that real quick.
Thanks. And going back to our timeline, and I always will say this, Kentucky has been and continues to be the pioneer and national leader. And that's not big talk. I mean, that can be confirmed, that we're the national leader we want to continue to be. And it goes back to that funding being important. But part of this is the story that we tell. This is a 3-page front and back document during the course of time that we share with our board members. You can share with folks. You can add, your own timeline to kind of help tell your story about what you've been up to. In even the past 5 years is 2 pages front and back to show you what we've been doing the past 5 years alone, and the historic achievements that have been made during this time frame. And hopefully, as I scroll down, you can see your work or your relation to your work as that. We did have, as I mentioned before, a great jump in digital learning coaches. We wanted to sustain that. When this money runs out, we did an emergency virtual attendance order, but we got another one in place. We're going to try to get a more permanent one in place. Internet access beyond the school campus, we have never made progress in the past 2 years in that area. Got 98% that have enough bandwidth to do their schoolwork beyond the school campus now, and there's tremendous funding sources that are there to address that. They're available directly to parents now to fund that and ongoing. What we did in the tornadoes and the technology services that we had, people being able to be paid on time because our immune system was in the cloud. One less thing for those folks to worry about. But all these services during the pandemic and during the tornado outbreak, because we are the national leader in cloud-based computing and instructional and administrative systems and communication systems, for the most part, those are able to go on. They would not, if the school had their internet ripped out, then they can go to another location and have access to it. But it wasn't zero, as if those things had been all on premise. And so we were really prepared well and could service those folks really well. National leader in providing internet safety and protections during the pandemic to meet the federal requirements, and we did that very quickly. Appreciate our partnership with our vendor partners, including Lightspeed, but also had to have a lot of other folks in place to do that. Of course, we launched the first comprehensive, Kentucky K-12 state plan for computer science. The Stillwell Award I mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast. So grateful for all the folks that made that happen in districts, along with our CATS partners that made that successful. We got to thank them, by the way. We had our CATS partner conference, our annual one. Was it last week or the week before last? Maybe it was last week. And got to thank them directly.
Last Wednesday.
Yeah, we do so much in a week. I lose track of time. So just last Wednesday. So thank you for all the partners, our vendor partners, along with districts that helped us. Obviously, what we did with STLP, historic first, the size of that, in using every new aspect of the central bank center was the first, and will always be the first to ever use every aspect of that. And our online testing, the highest that it's ever been. And you take a comparison to other states, and we've been very successful. And we've done a good job with all the other things we've done during the summers. We've had busy summers. You take a look, preparing and building for the summers. What we did with bandwidth increase, firewall improvement, internet safety, all these aspects are identified and preparing for the future. Once again, a very historic period of time. So I want to thank everyone that obviously made all those things happen, on our OET staff and in our districts with our vendor partners. Mike, the offers of assistance, we talked about this before, so I just let you highlight it again.
Yeah, I mean, you hit on the amount there in the operational plan that covers that, which is the $21 per ADA that and I had mentioned that last webcast. We're still on target for that, so that's what everybody should be anticipating. That's obviously contributed to by the dollar amount from the state appropriation to CATS funding, and along with and mostly from the E-rate money that we get back. That certainly could fluctuate a little bit to allow us to try and do a little bit more. But what we have identified is we should be able to rely on and count on comes out to where it'll be $21 per ADA for the upcoming year. And we will do that in 2 offers like we did this last year. So we'll get more information about the timeline for that. It'll be similar to what it was this last year we're leaving.
Also, for the August 3 board meeting and for the upcoming meeting with superintendents that are part of the advisory council, we'll be presenting a regulation for full-time enrolled virtual and remote students. We anticipate that to be a 1 or 2% thing ongoing. This is not going to be a growth type of area. We don't, now, as I mentioned before, is them taking one or 2 courses, that's going to grow online, but not be full-time year-round enrolled in a course. They'll be very rare, and they'll be presented up front to all the committees that this is not something that'll be the norm, it'll be the exception. But we know there's X% of students that thrived in that environment versus traditional classroom setting, or they had a medical condition, for example, that really required them to be there year-round, injury, an accident, and so they had to go to that model. It is a parent has to ask for this and want it along with the student. The second part is, the third part is the district has a choice of offering as an option or not offering as an option. I would say this is, if the district does not offer as an option, there's X number of those students and parents that will go someplace to get that service for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Is their child works better in an alternative setting, or they have a medical condition. And really during the pandemic, with the online, districts were able to actually increase some of their enrollment because they regained some of the homeschool students, for example. And so, I think every little bit counts, every pathway. You want to try to find a pathway for every student, but every financial aspect, as you know, your districts are funded by students coming to their districts. And so I think this is, it's worth pursuing. So that's just a number that wanted to share with you and make you aware of it as it kind of goes down this path. Also, just a reminder, we've been doing this for a while, that you got your cybersecurity health check coming up. You should look at this as an opportunity versus got to do. No other state really has this. The reason we put this in place, it gives you an opportunity to give your board and your superintendent a heads up in an audience about cybersecurity, things they need to be aware of. It's much like the presentation to the board every year for OET. I like that. No other office gets that opportunity to present kind of what they've been up to for the entire year, what their funding strategy is, what their strategic priorities are. We get to do that. I could look at that as, boy, that's a grind. I like that. You want them to be in sync with that. When you're trying to get additional funding, it helps you. But also in this case, when you're trying to get cybersecurity on the radar screen, you don't want to wait till a disaster happens and going, well, this is what we should have been doing. You can let them aware ahead of time. If they decide not to, you can say, well, that's what I was talking to you about 3 or 4 months ago that you didn't want to do. So look at that as a great opportunity to get in place. I know we do the same thing. You can say nearly every case we try to eat the same dog food or drink the same champagne that you all do. So anything we ask you all to do, we do ourselves. And so this is something when we wrote that regulation, we wrote that directly in there, and that was intentional that we added the agency onto that. Want to make sure we were doing the same type of thing. RFP was released. We mentioned on our previous webcast in June. We were hoping it was getting near the finish line, and Mike got to the finish line. It's out there. They're off.
Yeah. So what we'll say about that, obviously it's under the conditions of an active procurement. So there's little we can say about it, but it is out there. If somebody wants to see it, they can go to the Commonwealth portal and be able to get to where they can view that if they choose to. We're on track. We're on schedule to secure our next generation vehicle by which we provide internet and related networking services, and secure the E-rate eligibility along with that as well. So that's on track and progressing as we would hope and anticipate.
And obviously we've asked, you can take a look at that for some things that, impact pricing. We had talked before about, we will have an issue in 24, 25. Maybe we'll get better price than we have, but we've also asked for some additional things in here. And so I don't know how that impacts pricing. So encourage you to take a look at it, and it's out there. And thanks for all those that have worked together. Now, I just want to remind you is we had our Cio Summit. For those that participate in that, you remember this is one of our topics. Listen to you. We took all that in consideration along with our staff working on it. So appreciate those that had input to it. It includes all those that are part of the Cio Summit. They've had part of the KISTI conference. And on our OET staff, we have obviously some of our OET staff that are working very hard on that. Legislature put out something, Lisa. You want to tell them a little bit about what they put out?
Sure. Caught me off guard.
I have your name. Your name's listed first here.
I was typing. The committee last week, Legislative Oversight and Investigations Committee, had tasked the LRC with writing a report on broadband in Kentucky. And so it's centered around Kentucky Wired, KCNA, and the development of the new Office of Broadband that was created during the last legislative session. So the report goes through, and it didn't really look at deficits, but it was more about the recommendations moving forward. So they did give a lot of history. There's a really good timeline of all the legislation regarding broadband over the last 10 years. Sadly, it began before 2006, and so there was no mention, and I know, David, you'll reiterate this, but there was no mention that all schools were connected.
So I do want to mention it while you're there. It's the one ask. I said, can you include just one sentence? So I provided gobs of time in which I'm not happy about, because the only ask I had that they agreed to, they would let people know. I don't know why this is such a difficult task.
Yeah.
Just let them know our schools are connected, so I don't have to deal with legislators and others that still don't know. And you don't think that's a big deal? I would say 95% still don't know that. So it was a big deal to have it in this note. So I'll mention what I'm going to try to do to address that. But yes,
Right.
I was not happy. They did not mention all of our school districts and all of our schools and all of our classrooms already have internet, and we did it way before 2006.
Right. And so in today's agenda that David sent out, there is a link to the report. It's not the official, it's the one that went to the committee in their committee materials. It's not the LRC publication, which they approved that day, is not on their official site yet. So it is the full report, and there is also a PowerPoint accompanying that. So if you do want to listen to that, it's the last Legislative Oversight and Investigations Committee meeting, and it is available out there on the LRC archived legislation page. It's I can't remember exactly how long it is, but if it's something that you're interested in, I'd recommend you go listen to all the discussion. So.
Thanks, Lisa. So
Yep.
my way of dealing with this is I'm going to write to the committee. You're able to give input. We'll see if everybody, but to point out, by the way, somehow it was failed to mention we have all of our schools connected. We want you to know that. But also there's a part that was inaccurate. It talked about the agency getting $410 million in E-rate rebates in the past 10 years. We've got nowhere near that amount. Districts have gotten a huge portion of that. So we're going to look through, and I've asked our staff, Scott Kane and others, to take a look at how that breaks out during that 10-year period, because I want to correct that, because we didn't get 410 million. We maybe got 100 million of that we've turned around and given in the ways of offers and other things, but the other 300 million was other organizations beyond that. We don't want legislators to think that all came back directly to us. So I encourage you to take a look at it. Like I said, I'm immensely disappointed. As I've talked about before, in 30 years, just try to get the newspapers to mention one time, one sentence, all the school districts connected and all this. I don't know why this is such an uphill battle. But it's an interesting report. Chuck, an update on our Active Directory, not Active Directory. We've already done that one. Our baseline project.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, David. So, yeah, so as we've talked about long-term having an environment where, for efficiency purposes and security purposes, people have a single cloud-based, very secure identity. I'm sorry, guys, I'm getting blown up here with text, to access whatever they need to access from whatever device they've got. As we move toward that, there's a bridge project we've been talking about where we really need to teach people, primarily end users, that one of the most important assets they have and that they own is their identity, their login ID. Okay, because as we all know, especially the folks on this call, once that gets compromised via a variety of ways, really bad stuff can happen. So when we talk about the Security Baseline Project, it's really all about helping people learn, all right, how to manage and protect their identity. So for, about a third of the state that's out there, man, you guys are awesome because you've done this already, and it's awesome. So what we're doing, we've got the Security Baseline Project. The pilot phase is over. Every region has a representative that was a pilot. That's went extremely well. We're in the process right now of just tweaking some things, cleaning some things up, looking to start that core statewide migration the week of the July 25th. And really that migration there's two aspects to it that are really important. There's the, how do I apply these things to the end user community from a technology perspective? How do I turn on MFA? How do I enroll them in things like self-service password reset? All right. How do I help them understand the conditions by which they can log in or not? The technology part of it. But the most important part, I will say, and it's a matter of opinion, 90% of this is how well do you communicate and prepare your end users from the top down for what's coming? Because it's going to change what they do. It's going to change their world. All right. They're going to have to do something new, something unique, just to make sure they can protect their identities. So that's a big piece of this. So what I would say to everybody is stay very closely tuned in with your KITS engineers. They're driving this ship out at the regional level. They're going to be communicating with you, giving you updates, providing you resources that you can use to communicate with your superintendents, building leaders, board members as needed. They're going to make sure that you get on a schedule because at the end of the day, what we really want people to do is just appreciate functionally what you need to do to protect your identity. We're going through the same things here at KDE, as David will tell you. All right. And at the end of this, hopefully it opens some doors later this summer for us to kind of revisit what we want to start doing with integration with Infinite Campus and Munis, as Dee Dee mentioned earlier. But we feel pretty strongly that it's probably risky to start integrating all these things together with a single set of credentials unless you've got these security functions wrapped around your identity. So more to come on that, David, but I would just say to everybody, stay in touch with your KITS engineers. Bob and I are available for any questions that anybody has, as well as other key members of that project team. Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck. As we close out here, I was looking at the Go Soapbox comment, and we did update the staffing guidelines. So let for the person that asked that question, and thanks for responding to that, Chuck. Bob, if Dee Dee, if you please put up the response to number 6, and I do like the chat comments that you're making there. I'm kind of looking through those about this difficulty of it's important to toot your own horn, but you are dealing with folks that don't have kind of a blind spot to technology and understand the true value of that and how tough the skill set it requires to do that kind of work. It's good to see. Okay, Bob, any 10-second, 50-second comment about that?
You got it. We're trying to protect the identity. Along with the identity come the data that we all work with. And so we're trying to hit the big items, and especially things that we already have licenses for. DLP is something that for the most part we'll have some licenses for already because of what we're rolling out right now. As we look to maybe follow up these security baseline project, this may be coming down the road next because we want to make sure that only the right people have access to the right data, if that makes sense. This is the next place where our data breaches happen at a big level. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. I'm just looking through the chats here too. People don't understand what we do many times does not give value to our job. I was, during the pandemic, I think a good number of us in the technology industry became essential. I've always been worried as we pass that for folks getting to understand that. And you're right, Bruce, and your response to that is it's a challenge for folks to toot their own horn, but you got to. And with data and evidence, I think it's important to do that. When companies are offering you double what you currently make, it's hard to stay. Agree, Brent. That is true. Just briefly looking back here. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us. We're going to try to stay close to our hour time that we said no later than. We tried to do that. I'll stay on here for a little bit, just in general conversations, and I always try to simulate this the same thing as if I was in a meeting. I get a little bit there early to talk with folks. I stay a little bit afterward in an in-person meeting versus having these back to back. So once again, I appreciate what everyone does out there. Hope you've had a good summer break. You still got a little more time before the craziness of the school year officially begins. But once again, thanks for all what you do out there, and we'll see you next month. Bye.